River Castellanos pressed her palm against the reinforced viewing port of Habitat 7, watching another acid storm tier across the crystalline landscape of Kepler 442c. The window was actually a 3-inch thick polymer composite that cost more than most people's annual salary, but it was the only thing standing between her and an atmosphere that could dissolve human flesh in under 30 seconds. Still staring at your impossible dream? Dr. Marcus Webb's voice carried the same condescending tone that had grated on her nerves for the past 6 months. The colony's chief xenobiologist stepped up beside her, his pristine lab coat a stark contrast to River's mud-stained work coveralls. "It's not impossible," River replied, not bothering to look at him. "Just ... complicated." Outside, the acid rain fell in sheets of pale yellow, each drop carrying a pH level that would make battery acid seem gentle. Where it touched the native crystal formations, they actually grew, feeding off the corrosion in a process that defied every terraforming manual ever written. The sight should have been terrifying. Instead, River found it beautiful. Complicated? Webb laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. "River, you've been here 8 months. 8 months of failed atmospheric processors, dissolved equipment, and dead test plots. The Colonial Authority is already talking about evacuation protocols." River's jaw tightened. She'd heard the whispers in the cafeteria, seen the worried glances during staff meetings. Kepler 442c was supposed to be her masterpiece, the dead world that would prove human terraforming technology could work anywhere. Instead, it was becoming her graveyard. "The crystals," she said suddenly, pressing closer to the viewport. "Look at them during the storms." Webb rolled his eyes, but followed her gaze. Outside, the towering spires of native crystal weren't just surviving the acid rain, they were thriving. Each drop that hit them seemed to make them brighter, more complex. The formations pulse with an inner light that grew stronger as the storm intensified. So, they evolved here. Of course, they can handle the environment. "No, you don't understand." River turned to face him, her green eyes bright with sudden realization. "They're not just handling it, they're processing it, converting the acid into something else. What if we've been approaching this all wrong?" Before Webb could respond, the habitat's emergency klaxon began wailing. Red lights bathed the observation deck as the automated voice crackled through the speakers. "Attention all personnel. Atmospheric breach in Sector 7. Immediate evacuation required. This is not a drill." River's blood went cold. Sector 7 housed the colony's main atmospheric processing plant, the heart of their terraforming operation. If they lost that ... move, she shouted, grabbing her emergency kit and sprinting toward the exit. Webb followed, his earlier arrogance replaced by very real fear. The corridors of Habitat 7 became a maze of flashing lights and panicked colonists. River pushed through the crowd, her mind racing. A breach in Sector 7 meant the acid atmosphere was pouring into their primary life support systems. At best, they had hours before the backup systems failed. At worst ... she reached the sealed blast doors leading to Sector 7 and found Colonial Administrator Harrison arguing with Chief Engineer Patel. "Can't send anyone in there," Harrison was saying. "The atmospheric readings show pH levels that would kill someone in minutes." "Then what do you suggest?" Patel shot back. "We let the whole colony die slowly instead of quickly?" River stepped forward. "Let me go." Both men turned to stare at her. Harrison, a thin man with nervous eyes, looked like he was about to faint. "Absolutely not. You're our only terraforming specialist." "Which is exactly why I need to go," River said firmly. "I know those systems better than anyone. And I have a theory about the crystals." "The crystals?" Patel's eyebrows rose. "River, this isn't the time for theoretical xenobiology. It's exactly the time She interrupted. What if I told you the native crystal formations aren't just surviving the acid? They're converting it into something breathable? The corridor fell silent, except for the continued wailing of alarms. Harrison and Patel exchanged glances. That's impossible. Webb's voice came from behind them. The chemical composition alone is beyond our current understanding, River finished. Which is why we need to study it. Now, while we still can. She looked at each of them in turn. I'm going in, with or without your permission. Harrison opened his mouth to protest, but Patel held up a hand. What do you need? 20 minutes later, River stood at the inner airlock of Sector 7, encased in humanity's most advanced hazmat suit. The Mark 7 environmental protection system was rated for everything from hard vacuum to molten sulfur. But Kepler 442c's atmosphere was pushing it beyond design specifications. Atmospheric readings are off the charts, came Patel's voice through her consystem. pH levels in there are approaching negative values. Your suit's good for maybe 40 minutes before the seals start degrading. Understood, River replied, checking her equipment one final time. In addition to her standard terraforming tools, she'd grabbed something else, a sample container designed for collecting native crystal formations. If her theory was right, the inner airlock cycled, and River stepped into Hell. The atmospheric processing plant looked like it had been hit by a chemical weapon. Twisted metal dripped with residue that glowed faintly yellow, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with corrosive potential. But what caught River's attention weren't the destroyed machines. It was what was growing around them. Crystal formations, just like the ones outside, had somehow made their way into the facility. They sprouted from cracks in the floor, wound, around broken pipes, and pulsed with the same inner light she'd observed during the storms. But these crystals were different, more complex, more active. River, your suit readings are spiking. Webb's voice crackled through the comm. You need to get out of there. Not yet, she muttered, approaching the largest crystal formation. It had grown around the main atmospheric processor, like a cocoon, its faceted surface reflecting her suit lights in impossible patterns. As she watched, she could see the crystal actually breathing, expanding, and contracting in a steady rhythm. She activated her scanner and nearly dropped it in shock. The readings were incredible. The crystal wasn't just processing the corrosive atmosphere, it was turning it into oxygen. Pure, breathable oxygen. That's impossible, she whispered. What's impossible? Patel's voice came through her earpiece. The crystals. They're not just surviving the atmosphere, they're converting it. This formation alone is producing enough oxygen for 12 people. River, your suit integrity is at 70%. Webb interrupted. You need to leave, now. But River couldn't leave. Not when she was on the verge of the greatest discovery in terraforming history. She moved closer to the crystal, studying its structure. The formation wasn't random. There was a pattern to it, a logic that spoke of intentional design. That's when she noticed something else. The crystal wasn't just growing around the atmospheric processor. It was integrating with it. Tendrils of crystal had somehow fused with the machine's processing chambers, creating a hybrid system that was part technology, part biology. Oh my God, she breathed. What? Multiple voices asked simultaneously. It's not just converting the atmosphere, River said, her excitement overriding her fear. It's learning from our technology. The crystal has somehow interfaced with the atmospheric processor and improved its efficiency by a factor of, she ran quick calculations on her scanner, by a factor of 30. The implications were staggering. If the crystals could adapt, human technology, if they could be taught to work with terraforming systems instead of against them. Suit integrity at 50%. Webb's voice carried real panic now. River, the colony evacuation has been moved up. You have 10 minutes before the blast doors seal permanently. River looked at the crystal formation one more time, then made a decision that would either save the colony or kill her. She reached for the sample container at her belt and hesitated. Taking a sample would be the safe choice, the scientific choice. But something about the crystal's pulsing light, the way it seemed to respond to her presence, made her wonder if there was another way. "River," Harrison's voice exploded through her calm. "What are you doing?" She'd moved closer to the crystal, close enough that her suit's proximity sensors were screaming warnings, close enough to see her own reflection multiplied across thousands of faceted surfaces, close enough to notice that the crystal's pulsing had synchronized with her heartbeat. "Something incredible," she whispered, and reached out to touch the crystal formation. The moment her gloved hand made contact, everything changed. The first thing River felt was cold, not the chill of Kepler 442c's atmosphere, but something deeper. A cold that seemed to pierce through her environmental suit, through her skin, straight into her bones. For a moment, she thought she was dying, that the crystal's touch was somehow killing her despite the suit's protection. Then the cold became warmth, and the warmth became something else entirely. Understanding. Information flooded her mind, not in words or images, but in pure comprehension. She suddenly knew that the crystals weren't native to Kepler 442c. They were refugees, survivors of a dead world who had learned to adapt to the most hostile environments imaginable. They had been watching the human colony, studying their technology, trying to understand why these strange soft creatures were attempting to change a world that was already perfect for crystal-based life. "River," Webb's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Your biometrics are going crazy. What's happening?" She tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come. The crystal was still teaching her, showing her how they had survived world after world, always adapting, always learning. They had no concept of terraforming in the human sense to them. Every world was already perfect, just requiring the right kind of life to appreciate it. But they had observed humanity's desperate attempts to reshape Kepler 442c, and something about the humans' stubborn refusal to give up had fascinated them. Here was a species that wouldn't adapt to their environment. They would make the environment adapt to them. It was a concept so alien to the crystals that they had to understand it. So they had begun to experiment, growing around the human technology, trying to learn how it worked. The atmospheric processor breach wasn't an accident, it was a test. The crystals had wanted to see what would happen if they tried to help the humans instead of simply observing them. River gasped as the crystal's presence withdrew from her mind, leaving her with a head full of impossible knowledge and the certain understanding that she was no longer entirely human. "I'm okay," she said, though she wasn't sure that was true. She could feel something different in her body, a new awareness of the chemical processes happening around her. The corrosive atmosphere, that should have been invisible to her human senses, now painted patterns of light across her vision. She could taste the acid rain, sense the complex molecular chains that the crystals used to convert toxins into breathable air. "Your suit readings just stabilized," Webb said, confusion evident in his voice. "But that's impossible. The seals should have failed by now." River looked down at her environmental suit and nearly laughed. The crystal's touch had left a residue on the glove, a thin film that was somehow protecting the polymer from the acid atmosphere. More than that, she could see hairline crystal growths spreading across the suit's surface, integrating with the life support systems. "I need to get back," she said. "I have a solution." "A solution?" Harrison's voice crackled through the comb. "River, the evacuation ships are already on approach. We're abandoning the colony." "No," River said firmly. "Cancel the evacuation. We're not abandoning anything." She began walking back toward the airlock, her mind racing with possibilities. The crystal entity, she couldn't think of it as just a life form anymore. Not after what she'd experienced had shown her something incredible. The crystals didn't want to destroy human technology. They wanted to merge with it, to create something new that could thrive in environments that would kill either species alone. River, your suit telemetry is showing impossible readings. Patel's voice cut through her thoughts. According to this, you're somehow processing the atmosphere directly. That can't be right. But it was right. River could feel her lungs working differently, could sense the crystal modifications that were slowly spreading through her respiratory system. She should have been terrified, should have been screaming about alien contamination and forced mutations. Instead, she felt complete for the first time in her life. She reached the airlock and cycled through, her mind already working on the modifications they would need to make to the colony's systems. The crystals had shown her the way, not terraforming in the traditional sense, but something new. Something that would let humans and crystals coexist, each species contributing what they did best. River. Webb grabbed her arm as she stepped out of the decontamination chamber. We need to get you to medical immediately. Your exposure readings are exactly what they need to be, River interrupted. She pulled off her helmet, ignoring the gasps from the assembled crowd. She should have needed a respirator in the colony's atmosphere, should have shown signs of acid exposure. Instead, she was breathing normally, her skin healthy and unmarked. Administrator Harrison stepped forward, his face pale. What happened in there? River smiled, and when she did, her eyes reflected light in a way they never had before. Not quite human, but not entirely alien either. I figured out how to save the colony, she said. But first, we need to stop thinking like conquerors and start thinking like partners. The colony's main conference room had never hosted a meeting quite like this one. River stood at the head of the table. Her appearance subtly changed in ways that made everyone uncomfortable. Her eyes held flecks of crystalline light, and when she breathed, there was sometimes a faint shimmer in the air around her. You're asking us to trust an alien organism that has already infected you, Dr. Webb said, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. For all we know, you're not even human anymore. I'm human, River replied calmly. I'm just ... more than I was before. The crystal entity didn't infect me, Marcus. It partnered with me. There's a difference. Administrator Harrison leaned forward in his chair. Explain it to me like I'm 5 years old, River. Because right now, all I see is our terraforming specialist talking about cooperation with what might be the most hostile environment in known space. River nodded and activated the room's holographic projector. The display showed a three-dimensional model of Kepler 442c's atmosphere, with chemical formulas floating in mid-air like glowing equations. Traditional terraforming is about force, she began. We take a hostile world and we reshape it to match human needs. It works, but it's slow, expensive, and sometimes it fails spectacularly. She gestured to the atmospheric readings. Kepler 442c's. Acid storms, the pH levels, the crystalline interference with our equipment. We've been treating all of these as problems to solve. The display changed, showing the crystal formations she'd discovered in Sector 7. But what if they're not? Problems? What if they're solutions we haven't learned to use yet? Chief Engineer Patel frowned at the display. Those formations destroyed 30 million credits worth of equipment. No, River said, her voice gaining excitement. They integrated with it. The crystals don't understand the concept of destruction the way we do. To them, everything is just raw material for adaptation. They saw our atmospheric processor failing and tried to help. She manipulated the display, showing how the crystal growth had actually improved the processor's efficiency. The breach in Sector 7 wasn't an accident. It was a test. The crystals wanted to see if they could make our technology work better. And they succeeded. The hybrid crystal processor system is producing breathable atmosphere at rates we've never achieved with pure human technology. Webb stood up abruptly. This is insane. You're talking about willingly allowing alien contamination of our life support systems. I'm talking about evolution, River replied. About taking the next step in human development. The room fell silent. Through the reinforced viewport, they could see another acid storm beginning to form on the horizon. The sight that had once filled them with dread now looked different to River. She could see the patterns in the storm, the way the crystals were guiding the atmospheric chemistry. "What are you proposing?" Harrison asked quietly. River took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would either save the colony or damn it forever. "Complete integration. We stop fighting the planet's ecosystem and start working with it. The crystals have been trying to communicate with us for months. They're not hostile. They're curious. They want to understand how our technology works, and they're willing to share their own biological adaptations in return." She manipulated the display again, showing a schematic of the colony with crystal formations integrated into every system. Imagine atmospheric processors that repair themselves, that adapt to changing conditions automatically. Imagine buildings that grow stronger instead of corroding in acid rain. Imagine humans who can survive in environments that would kill baseline. Humans, but who are still fundamentally human in all the ways that matter. "And the cost?" Webb demanded. "What happens to human genetic integrity? What happens to our species?" River looked at him with her crystal-flecked eyes. "We become what we need to become to survive, just like we always have." The silence stretched out until Patel finally spoke. "The evacuation ships arrive in 6 hours. If we're going to try this, we need to decide now." Administrator Harrison looked around the room at his staff, these people who had followed him too. The edge of human space in hopes of building something new. His gaze finally settled on River. "What do you need?" River's smile was radiant. "Access to the main computer core and volunteers. The process works best when it's chosen freely." "How many volunteers?" Harrison asked. "All of us," River replied. "The crystals think in terms of collective consciousness. They can work with individuals, but they're designed for integration with entire communities. If we're going to do this, we need to do it together." Webb shook his head. "This is madness. We're talking about fundamentally altering human biology based on the word of someone who's already been compromised by alien influence." But Chief Engineer Patel was studying the schematics with growing excitement. "The efficiency improvements alone would justify the risk," he said. "If River's right about the adaptive capabilities." "I'm right," River said simply, "and I can prove it." She walked to the viewport and pressed her palm against the polymer surface. Where she touched, crystal formations began to grow, not the chaotic growths they'd seen before, but structured, purposeful patterns. The formations spread across the viewport's surface, and suddenly, the view outside became impossibly clear. The crystal layer was acting as a filter, cleaning the visual distortion caused by the acid atmosphere. More than that, information began to appear on the crystal surface: atmospheric readings, weather patterns, chemical compositions. The crystals were turning the viewport into a living computer interface. "Magnificent," Patel whispered. Administrator Harrison stood up, his decision made. "Cancel the evacuation. Send word to Colonial Command that we're implementing an experimental solution." He looked at River. "God help us all, but I think you're right. We've been fighting a war when we should have been making friends." River nodded, then looked around the room at the faces of her colleagues, soon to be something more than colleagues, something more than human. "The crystals have been waiting for us to be ready," she said. "They're about to show us what it really means to be children of the stars." The main computer core of Habitat 7 hummed with activity as River made her final preparations. The massive quantum processors that managed every aspect of colony life were about to become something unprecedented, the first hybrid human crystal intelligence ever created. Are you sure about this? Webb asked for the 20th time. Despite his objections in the meeting, he had volunteered for the integration process. Fear and scientific curiosity warred across his features as he watched River attach crystalline growth matrices to the computer's input ports. No, River replied honestly, but I'm sure about the alternative. Without this, we all die. With it, we become something new. Around the core chamber, 43 colonists stood waiting. They had voted unanimously to attempt the integration, even knowing that success might mean they could never return to purely human civilization. Earth Command would probably classify them as contaminated, possibly as a separate species entirely. River looked at each of them, engineers and scientists, farmers and technicians, all of them bound together by humanity's oldest drive, the need to survive and thrive in impossible conditions. The crystal entity has been patient with us, she said, her voice carrying clearly in the chamber's acoustics. They've watched us struggle for months, trying to understand why we keep fighting, instead of adapting. Today, we show them that humans can do both. She activated the first growth matrix, and crystal formations began spreading through the computer core's processing arrays. The patterns were beautiful geometric fractals that pulsed with bioluminescent light, but they were also functional, creating new pathways for information flow that made the quantum processors look primitive by comparison. Integration beginning, the computer's voice announced, but it sounded different now. Harmonics that had never existed before added depth to the synthesized speech. Human crystal interface established. River felt the familiar cold warmth sensation as the crystal entity's presence touched her mind again. But this time, it was different. Instead of one alien intelligence reaching out to one human, she could sense the collective consciousness of the crystal beings, touching the minds of all, 43 colonists simultaneously. The experience was overwhelming. River suddenly knew things she had never learned: the chemical composition of Kepler 442c's core, the migration patterns of crystal formations across 17 different worlds, the mathematical principles governing atmospheric conversion. But she also remained herself, her human memories and personality intact. Around the chamber, she could hear gasps and cries of wonder as the other colonists underwent their own transformations. Chief Engineer Patel laughed out loud as he suddenly understood the quantum mechanics of crystal growth. Dr. Webb wept as he experienced the universe from the perspective of a billion-year-old collective consciousness. Status report, Administrator Harrison said, though his voice carried new harmonics that matched the computer's altered speech patterns. River checked her internal sensors and was startled to realize that she had internal sensors now. The crystal modifications had given her direct access to atmospheric readings, temperature variations, electromagnetic field fluctuations. She was like a living environmental monitoring station. Integration successful, she reported. All colonists showing stable biocrystalline fusion. Computer core is operating at 400% baseline efficiency. And the atmospheric processors? Harrison asked. River smiled, her crystalline-flecked eyes bright with triumph. See for yourself. The chamber's viewports cleared as crystal. Formations spread across their surfaces, creating perfect transparency despite the acid storm raging outside. But what they saw through those viewports made everyone gasp. The landscape of Kepler 442c was changing. The random crystal formations that had dotted the terrain were reorganizing themselves into structured patterns. Atmospheric processing towers were growing from the ground itself, built from living crystal that could adapt and repair itself. The acid rain was still falling, but now it was being converted into breathable atmosphere before it even reached the ground. Extraordinary, Webb whispered, his scientific mind reeling at the implications. They're terraforming the entire planet, not changing it to match human needs, but creating an environment where both species can thrive. It's not just this planet, River said, her awareness expanded far beyond the colony. She could sense the crystal entity's collective memory, their experiences across dozens of worlds. They've been waiting for a partner species, someone who could help them spread to worlds they could never adapt to alone. They chose us. Administrator Harrison activated the colony's communication array to send a message to Earth Command. But when he spoke, his words were heard not just on Earth, but across the crystal entity's vast network of consciousness, a communication web that spanned multiple star systems. This is Colony Director Harrison of Kepler 442c, he began. We are pleased to report that terraforming operations have exceeded all expectations. We have achieved full atmospheric conversion and established sustainable ecosystems. The colony is not only viable, it's thriving. He paused, considering his next words carefully. We are also pleased to announce humanity's first successful partnership with a non-human intelligence. The crystal entities of Kepler 442c have proven to be invaluable allies in the terraforming process. We recommend that all future colonization efforts consider collaborative approaches rather than purely anthropocentric terraforming. What he didn't mention, what Earth Command wouldn't understand for years to come, was that humanity had just taken its next evolutionary step. The 43 colonists were still human, but they were also something more. They could survive in environments that would kill baseline humans, could process atmospheric chemistry with the efficiency of living computers, could communicate across vast distances through the crystal network. River, Webb said quietly, what have we become? River looked at him, at all of them, her extended family of hybrid human crystal beings, and felt a profound sense of completion. We've become what we were always meant to be, she said. Explorers, survivors, bridge builders between worlds and species. She gestured toward the viewport, where crystal formations were creating new gardens in what had once been a hellscape. We've become the children of a universe much stranger and more wonderful than we ever imagined. Outside, the acid storm was ending, and for the first time since their arrival on Kepler 442c, the colonists could see stars through the clearing atmosphere. But now those stars didn't look like distant lights in an empty void. Through the crystal network, they could sense other worlds, other possibilities, other opportunities for partnership and growth. The last terraformer had become the first of something entirely new. And across the galaxy, ancient crystal entities that had waited eons for the right partner species began to sing songs of welcome and possibility, their harmonies carrying on solar winds toward worlds that would soon know the touch of hybrid human crystal hands. 6 months after the integration, River stood in what had once been the colony's hydroponics lab and was now something that had no name in any human language. The space was filled with hybrid vegetation plants that were part Earth-origin crops, part crystalline life forms. They grew in soil that was actually a living crystal matrix, processing atmospheric toxins and converting them into nutrients. The harvest from these impossible gardens fed not just the 43 colonists, but also the hundreds of researchers who had arrived from Earth to study the Kepler hybrid protocol. River had become something of a celebrity in scientific circles, the terraformer, who had achieved what was being called the greatest breakthrough in human expansion since the invention of the hyperspace drive. But she knew the truth was more complex. Humanity hadn't conquered Kepler 442c. They had been adopted by it. The crystal entities had been waiting for millennia for a species with the right combination of adaptability and stubborn determination. They had tested dozens of other species, but only humans had possessed the peculiar mixture of cooperation and individual initiative that made true partnership possible. Incoming transmission from Earth Command announced the colony's AI which was now a hybrid human crystal intelligence that called itself Marcus Webb 7, a name that honored both the original Dr. Webb and the 7 crystal entities that had merged with the computer core. River accepted the transmission, and the familiar face of Admiral Chun appeared in the air before her. The holographic display was generated by crystalline formations that had grown throughout the colony's walls, creating a communication network that put anything on Earth to shame. Director Castellanos, the Admiral said formally. River's promotion to Colony Director had been automatic once. Administrator Harrison had accepted a position as Earth's first Xenological Partnership Coordinator. I'm calling to inform you that the Colonial Senate has approved expansion of the Kepler Protocol to 17 additional worlds. River felt a surge of excitement that was shared instantly with every other hybrid in the colony through their crystal. Link. 17 worlds meant 17 opportunities to create new partnerships between humans and crystal entities. It meant 17 chances to prove that cooperation was more powerful than conquest. That's wonderful news, Admiral, River replied. When do we begin selecting candidates for the integration process? That single quotes S. complicated, Admiral Chun said, his expression troubled. There's been significant opposition from the Genetic Purity Coalition. They're arguing that the hybrid colonists are no longer technically human and therefore have no claim to human rights or protections. River's jaw tightened. She had expected this, had known that some factions on Earth would see the successful integration as a threat rather than an opportunity. And what's Earth Command's official position? Officially? You and your colonists remain full citizens of the Earth Federation, with all associated rights and protections. Admiral Chun's expression softened slightly. Unofficially, there are people in the government who are terrified of what you've accomplished. They see humans who can survive in acid storms and communicate across interstellar distances as a threat to baseline human dominance. River nodded. She had felt the fear in some of the researchers who had come to study the colony, the way they looked at the hybrids, like they were looking at weapons rather than people. We'll deal with the political implications as they arise, she said finally. Right now, our focus is on perfecting the integration process and preparing the next generation of hybrid colonists. After the transmission ended, River walked to the observation deck that had once required thick polymer barriers to protect human observers from the acid atmosphere. Now the barriers were gone, replaced by crystalline formations that provided better protection while maintaining perfect transparency. She could step outside if she wanted to, could walk in the acid rain that had once been lethal, could breathe an atmosphere that would kill any baseline human in seconds. But what struck her most wasn't the physical changes. It was the sense of connection to her fellow colonists, to the crystal entities, to the planet itself. Through the crystalline network, she could sense the slow pulse of geological processes, the complex chemistry of atmospheric cycles, the delicate balance of a living world. Beautiful evening. Dr. Webb's voice came from behind her. He had changed more than most of the colonists, his integration with the crystal entities going deeper than anyone else's. When he moved, there were sometimes flashes of light beneath his skin, and his eyes had become completely crystalline. It is, River agreed. Marcus, do you think we made the right choice? Webb considered the question seriously. I think we made the only choice that mattered. We could have died as heroes, or lived as something new. I prefer living, River smiled. 6 months ago, Webb would have been horrified by what he had become. Now he seemed more at peace than she had ever seen him. The children are adapting well, Webb continued. The next generation of hybrids will be even more integrated than we are. River nodded. 3 of the colonists had been pregnant during the integration process, and their children were being born with capabilities that exceeded even their hybrid parents. They could communicate directly with crystal entities from birth, could process complex atmospheric chemistry intuitively, and showed signs of being able to survive in environments that would challenge even the adult hybrids. They're not human, Webb said quietly. Not in the traditional sense. No, River agreed. They're better. They're what humans become when we stop fighting the universe and start working with it. As if summoned by their conversation, little Anna Patel toddled onto the observation deck, her crystalline-flecked eyes bright with curiosity. At 18 months old, she could already communicate complex concepts through the crystal network, and had once prevented a minor atmospheric processing malfunction by instinctively adjusting the chemical balance in her section of the colony. Anna looked up at River and Webb, then pointed toward the viewport where crystal formations were growing. A new garden in real time. Pretty, she said in perfect standard, though River knew she was also sharing a complex emotional sensory data stream through the crystal network, the child's way of describing the mathematical beauty of crystalline growth patterns. Yes, River sighed, picking up the little girl. Very pretty. Through the crystal network, she could sense the other hybrid colonies being established across the galaxy. Each one a unique partnership between human ingenuity and crystal adaptability. She could feel the slow pulse of terraform worlds being born, the joy of crystal entities discovering new forms of partnership, the excitement of humans learning to become something greater than they had been. Earth Command might be afraid of what humanity was becoming, but River felt only gratitude. The crystal entities had given them the galaxy, not through conquest, but through cooperation. They had shown humans how to be citizens of the universe, rather than just tourists visiting alien worlds. As the three of them watched the crystalline gardens grow beneath the alien stars, River Castellano's terraformer, hybrid bridge between species, felt the deep satisfaction of a job well done. Humanity had found its place in the cosmos at last, and the cosmos would never be the same.